Hello everybody and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Video Clips, and I'll just start with a couple of announcements. The first thing is that the second Advanced Study Program class for March is tomorrow night, March 19th, and I'm covering Peter Gotchke's book called Deadly Drugs and Organized Crime. And believe me, you don't want to miss this. I thought I knew all about this pharmaceutical thing, but I've learned so much from this book. I really think that you will enjoy the information I've prepared for you. And of course you get slides and materials and that sort of thing. And if you can't listen to the call live, it's always great if you can and you can ask questions. You can listen to the recording that we make of the call if you're a subscriber. Second thing, next Monday starts the last class of winter semester. I know it's spring, but we offer these classes all semester long. It's called Plant-Based Nutrition and Health. I teach it. We're going to talk about the connection between diet and health, alternative dietary theories, what some of our opponents are saying, and how to look at the research critically, etc. And then our next Intro to Plant-Based Nutrition is March 20th at 9 p.m. 90 minutes designed to help you get started on the right track for eating a plant-based diet. All right, so I have two topics picked out for today, and the first one is I want to talk about this issue of moderation and the Mediterranean diet. I've been getting a lot of questions about this lately, and really what this is all about, in my opinion, is an attempt to justify unhealthy eating habits. So acquaintances and friends, some of mine, they'll cite the eating habits and health status of Europeans and the French for doing the things that they do. After all, we all know that Europeans eat cheese, drink wine almost every day, and have lower rates of disease, and we all know that they remain fairly lean while they do these things. Well, the only problem is it isn't true. In France, which is purported to be the place where people eat cheese and wine with careless abandon and maintain their lean frame and they're healthy, 15% of the population is obese right now, and 32.3% are overweight. Obesity levels have increased 35% in the 18 to 24 population. The problem, according to experts, is that French people have started eating and living a whole lot like Americans. There's an increase in the amount of fast food and junk food and prepared foods that people take home, more eating at people's desks in front of the television, less physical activity. And as it turns out, the French do not do any better eating some version of the standard American diet with wine and cheese than Americans are doing and engaging in these behaviors. But even before our habits had crept over across the pond into the French population, back in the 90s when the famed Long Girl study was published, which showed that people that eating a Mediterranean diet had lower rates of heart disease than people eating the standard American diet, French rates of overweight and obesity were high. In 1997, 29.7% were overweight and 8.5% were obese. So this is hardly an advertisement for the French diet or the Mediterranean diet, which actually is a conglomeration of different eating patterns in different countries. The disease rates overall in Europe, not so good right now. Cardiovascular disease is the leading killer. 1.9 million deaths per year about right now, and 40% of all deaths in the European Union are from cardiovascular disease. Now the French government, the European Union, they're considering all the stuff that we've tried over here that doesn't seem to make much difference, such as stricter labeling laws, for example. But we know that the only thing that will work is education. The French and other Europeans need to see films like Forks Over Knives, to read books like The China Study and Food Over Medicine, and adopt a health-promoting, low-fat, plant-based diet like the one we recommend here at the Wellness Forum. Before fast food and some of our habits were sweeping across Europe, these people were not healthy. They might have been healthier than we were, but they were not healthy by our definition of healthy, which means low disease rates, low obesity and overweight rates. These problems have been persistent in Europe for a very, very long time. And the combination of the standard American diet and this Mediterranean eating pattern with olive oil, wine, and cheese is just deadly for these people, just like it is here. So do not use the Mediterranean diet and the cheese and wine and the superior health status of Europeans as an excuse to continue your bad habits. It doesn't work. Research says it does not work. All right, now let's get rid of another myth. We've covered the myth of the Mediterranean diet. Let's talk about housework counting as exercise. It's really difficult for me to admit failure, but the reality is that most of the people that I hassle and nag about exercising and getting physically active don't do it. Some will do it for a while, some will stop and start and stop and start, and they just never really sort of make this part of their life, and even people who do often do not do enough activity. And one, there's no end to the excuses. I've heard them all by this point in time, but the one that I hear often is, I'm active. I clean my house. I weed my flower gardens. I walk my dogs. I'm busy all day long. Well, I do those things too. Actually, all except for walking the dog because I don't have one, but I'm very active around my house. I do clean my own house, but I don't count these things as exercise. And I tell our members not to count them as exercise too. A new study says I'm right. The study was designed to figure out the contribution that domestic chores make to total weekly physical activity, and if there's any relationship between the definition of being active, as in, I do my own housework, walk my dog, and being lean and healthy. So the study was conducted in Ireland. It had over 4,500 participants, and 42.7% reported levels of activity which met or exceeded the current recommendation in the UK. Domestic activity, as it was referred to, accounted for about 35.6% of the moderate to vigorous physical activity. And for women in particular, if you took out that domestic activity, only about 20% met the current recommendations for activity levels. The problem is, in this whole thing, that domestic activity was negatively associated with leanness. The researchers concluded that housework and being just active may not be sufficient to provide the benefits normally associated with meeting the physical activity guidelines. Now, it is true that doing something is better than doing nothing. I'd rather see somebody doing housework than sitting on the couch. But it is also true that just being active is not enough, and in addition to gardening, cleaning, and other daily activities, you need programmed exercise. You've got to get your heart rate up. You've got to move around. It's true that this is uncomfortable for most, if not all, people. It takes time and commitment. It may not be fun. I mean, people come to the gym sometimes and ask me, am I going to like this? I tell them, no, you're not going to like it. It's going to hurt in the beginning. And they'll come to our hot yoga class and say, am I going to enjoy this? Probably not when you first start out. It gets better as time goes on. But being sick is uncomfortable. It takes time, and it's never fun, all right? So I think you have to decide what you're going to invest your time and effort in. I said for many years that everybody on the planet spends about the same amount of time, given a certain lifespan. Let's say we've got 300 people going to live to be 90 years old. They're all going to spend the same amount of time on health. The question is the time going to be spent exercising and eating well, or becoming progressively more sick and investing time in doctor's visits and surgeries and hospitalizations and drugs and treatments and waiting rooms and all that kind of stuff. I don't know about you, but I think exercise and eating well are the better and easier alternatives. All right, that's all for today. As usual, feel free to pass this on to anybody who you think might enjoy watching it, and I'll be back to you again on Thursday.